We are on Second Maccabees 12 and likely should finish it off tonight. It's only four more chapters. Um, but interesting nonetheless. And so, yeah, so why don't we jump right into it? Um, who wants to read chapter 12? Where is Michael, by the way?
Um,
Because he would be reading right now.
I'm not sure if he's coming or not. Jenny was sick.
Oh,
So
okay. Well,
You should take her husband. You should.
that is a understandable responsibility.
yeah.
Who would like to read chapter 12?
I'll do it.
Okay.
When these agreements had been made, Lysias returned to the king, and the Jews went back to their farming. Can y'all hear me? Hello?
They're muted. Susan, can you hear?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
It took me a minute.
No worries.
Okay. When these agreements had been made, Lysias returned to the king, and the Jews went back to their farming. But some of the governors of various locales, Timothy and Apollonius, son of Janaeus, as well as Hieronymus and Demophon, and in addition, Nicanor, the commander of the Cyprians, would not allow the Jews to enjoy tranquility and live in peace. And then the people of Joppa did so great and ungodly deed as this. They invited the Jews who lived among them, together with their wives and children, to embark on ships equipped for sea, as though they harbored no ill will toward them. Now, this was done by the common vote of the city. But when the Jews welcomed this, wishing to live in peace and suspecting nothing, the men of Joppa took them out to sea and drowned at least 200 of them. When Judas learned of the cruelty visited on his countrymen, he summoned his men. So when had called upon God, the righteous judge, he attacked the murderers of his brothers. He set the harbor on fire by night, burned the ships, put to the sword those who fled there. But since the gates of the city were closed, he departed, intending to come again and root out the whole community of Joppa. However, when he learned that the people in Jamnia intended to wipe out the Jews who were living among them in the same way, he attacked the Jamnian people by night and set the harbor and the fleet on fire. Therefore, the glow of the light was visible from as far as Jerusalem, 30 miles away. That's like Smyrna.
Yep.
And when they had gone about a mile from there on their march against Timothy, Arabs attacked him with no less than 5,000 infantry and 500 cavalry. After a strongly contested battle, Judas and his men, with God's help, were successful. The defeated nomads pleaded with Judas to grant them pledges of friendship. They promised to give him livestock to benefit them in other ways. So Judas, supposing he could indeed be useful in varied ways, agreed to make peace with them. Then, after he accepted their pledges, they returned to their tents. He also attacked a certain town named Caspin, strongly fortified with earthworks and walls and inhabited by mixed population of Gentiles. Those within it trusted in the security of the walls and their supply of provisions. They behaved very contemptuously towards Judas and his men, insulting them and even blaspheming and saying unlawful things. But Judas and his men called upon the great Lord of the world, who overthrew Jericho without battering rams or engines of war in the times of Joshua. Then Judas and his men assaulted the walls. They overpowered the city by the will of God and inflicted such indescribable slaughter that the adjoining lake, a quarter of a mile wide, seemed to be filled with blood. Jeez. From there, they went 95 miles and continued on to Tarik to the Jews who were called Tubiana. They did not overtake Timothy in that region, for by then he had departed from there without accomplishing anything. But in one place, Timothy left a strong garrison. Dositheus and Sosipater, who were commanders under Maccabees, marched out and crushed those men Timothy left in the stronghold, over 10,000 soldiers. But Maccabeus organized his army and division, setting men in command of the divisions, and hastened after Timothy, who had with him 120,000 infantry and 2,500 cavalry. And when Timothy learned of the approach of Judas, he sent the women and the children ahead of with the baggage to a place called Carnaeum. For that place was hard to attack and difficult to access because of the narrowness of all its places. But when Judas first division appeared, alarmed, and fear came over the enemy at the manifestations to them of him who sees all things. They ran off in flight, rushing headlong in every direction, so as to be often hurt by their own men and stabbed by the points of their own swords. Judas pursued them with great vigor, piercing the sinful men with the sword and killing as many as 30,000 of them. Dang. Timothy himself fell into the hands of Dositheus and Sosipater and their soldiers. With great trickery, he pleaded with them to let him go safely because he held the parents of most of them and some of their brothers to whom no regard would be shown. So when with many words he had confirmed his solemn promise to restore them unharmed, he released him for the sake of rescuing their brothers. Then Dotus marched against Carnaeum and the temple of Adagardas and destroyed 25,000 people. Holy. After the rout and slaughter of these, he also marched on Ephron, a fortified town where Lysias lived with countless people of all nations. Strong young men were set as guards before the walls and fought mightily. Sorry about that. Let's see. Many provisions of war engines and missiles were stored there, but the Jews called upon the Lord, who with power crushes the strength of his enemies. Thus they took possessions of the city and killed as many as 25,000 of those within. Moving away from Ephron, they hurried to Scythopolis, 75 miles from Jerusalem. But when the Jews who lived there testified to the goodwill of the people of Scythopolis had shown them and their civilized treatment of them in times of trouble, they thanked them and encouraged them also to be favorable to the Jewish race in the future. Then Judas and his men arrived at Jerusalem, the Feast of Weeks being close at hand. After this feast, also called Pentecost, they marched against Gorgias, the governor of Idumea. He came out against them with 3,000 infantry and 400 cavalry. After they engaged in battle, it happened that a few of the Jews were killed. But a certain Dositheus, one of Bassiner's men, a man on horseback and a strong man, grabbed hold of Gorgias. He took hold of his cloak and was dragging him off by sheer strength. He intended to take the accursed man alive, but one of the Thracian cavalry chased him down and severed his arm. So Gorgias fled to Marissa. Now Edras and his men had been fighting for a long while and retired. So Judas called on the Lord to show himself as their ally and leader in battle. They began to sound the battle cry in the language of their forefathers and sang hymns. And then he charged against the troop of Gorgias when they at least expected it and set them to flight. Then Judas retrieved his army and entered the city of Adullam. At the seventh day was dawning. They purified themselves according to custom and spent the Sabbath there. The following day, as was now necessary, Judas and his men left to gather up the bodies of those killed in battle to bring them back to rest with their kindred in the tombs of their forefathers. But under the tunics of each of the dead, they uncovered sacred tokens of the Jamnian idols, which Jews were forbidden by law to wear. So the reason these men died in battle became clear to everyone. Thus, they all blessed the ways of the Lord and the righteous judge who reveals the hidden things. They turned to supplication and prayed that the sin they had committed might be completely blotted out. The noble Judas exhorted his people to guard them from sin, for with their own eyes they had seen what happened to those who died in battle because of their sin. He then took up an offering from his soldiers amounting to 2,000 silver drachmas and sent it to Jerusalem to present as in a sin offering. In doing so, he acted properly and with honor, taking note of the resurrection. For if he were not looking for the resurrection of those fallen, it would have been utterly foolish to pray for the departed. But since he was looking to the reward of splendor laid up for those who repose in godliness, it was a holy and godly purpose. Thus he made atonement for the fallen so as to set them free from their transgressions. Is that why we pray for the dead?
There's
Because this guy killed all these people.
A lot of people.
a lot of people, hundreds, over 100,000 there. People got slaughtered there. 25,000 here, 25,000 there, 30,000 there. I mean, that's some of the towns around here, size of that. But yeah, several things there. It describes where Jamnia is, 30 miles away from Jerusalem, and that's again, remember the Council of Jamnia is what ended up creating the Masoretic text. So it's very close to Jerusalem. went through all the battles again, talked about all the slaughters, but notice again the emphasis of the success is on God. They're only successful because God is with them and allows them to do that. And then yes, the prayers for the dead, which again predates Christianity, but even talks about the resurrection. I mean, again, we can understand why the Council of Jamnia wanted this book out of the scriptures after Christ came along, and with the resurrection, because it just it points to Jesus.
So does modern Judaism believe in a resurrection? My Jewish friends tell me that they do, but
they,
is it in their?
it's not necessarily in their scripture per se, um, but it is in their understanding of things. But it's not a resurrection that we similar to our resurrection, the Christian resurrection.
So what do they think it is?
Not really sure, but it's not I'm not even sure it's a bodily resurrection. Um, I think it's just they believe the soul will rise, certainly, but I don't know if it's a bodily resurrection. So, but they do care for the body after death. So
Mhm.
there is that element of things. So, yeah, again, very familiar things here. So, okay, who wants to read chapter 13?
Okay.
Yep.
In the 149th year, Judas and his men got word that Antiochus Epicter was marching against Judea with a huge army, and with him his guardian Lysias, who was in charge of the government. Each of them had a Greek army of 110,000 infantry, 5,300 horsemen, 22 elephants, and 300 chariots armed with scythes. Menelaus also joined forces with them. It was a great irony that he encouraged Antiochus not for the preservation of his homeland, but for his expedition to be established in authority. But the king of kings aroused anger in Antiochus against this sinful man. So when Lysias pointed out that this man was the cause of all the trouble, he commanded them to take him to Beroria, to put him to death as was custom there. For there is a tower in that place, 50 cubits high and filled with ashes. It is also a contrivance continuing around it on all sides that inclines steeply into the ashes. There they all shove anyone guilty of sacrilege or who has done excessive evils to their destruction. Thus it happened that Menelaus, the lawbreakers, died by such a destiny. He was even deprived of a burial in the ground. Now this was altogether just, for since he committed many sins against the sacred altar, whose fire and ashes were holy, he should get death for himself in ashes. The king was coming with barbarous arrogance to face the Jews with things far worse than anything done by his father. But when Judas learned of this, he charged the people to call upon the Lord day and night, asking him to help them now as he had formerly, for they were about to be deprived of their law, their homeland, and their temple. They prayed he would not allow the people who had just begun a new life to fall into the hands of blaspheming Gentiles. After they all made the same petition together and constantly implored the merciful Lord with weeping, fasting, and prostrations for 3 days, Judas encouraged them and commanded them to stand firm. Then he consulted privately with the elders and determined to march out to let the matter be decided by the help of God before the king's army could enter Judea and take possession of the city. So, committing the results to the Creator of all and urging those with him to fight nobly to the death for the laws, the temple, the city, and the country, and the commonwealth, he positioned his army near Modin. After he gave his men the watchword, God's victory, and chose his best young men, he besieged the royal palace by night, killing as many as 2,000 men in the camp. He also slew the leading elephant and its rider. As a result, they filled the camp with terror and disorder and departed victoriously. This all happened by daybreak because the protection of the Lord was with him. Thus the king tasted the courage of the Jews and plotted a strategy against their positions. He marched against Bethzur, a stronghold of the Jews, but was turned back. He attacked again, but was beaten. Judas then sent supplies to the men inside the fortress. But Rhodocus, a man from the Jewish army, tipped off the enemy with secret information. Thus he was sought after, caught, and imprisoned. The king spoke a second time with the people in Bethzer, gave assurances, received their pledges, and departed. He then attacked Judas and his forces, but was vanquished. He then learned that Philip, who he had left in charge of the government in Antioch, had lost his sanity. He was disheartened and summoned the Jews and yielded and gave an oath to honor all their rights. Thus he settled with them and offered sacrifice, respected the temple, and treated the place humanely. He welcomed Maccabees and Hegemonides, who was left as governor from Ptolemais to Gerar. Then he went to Ptolemais, but the people of Ptolemais were indignant over the treaty with the Jews. In fact, they were so enraged they sought to annul its provisions. But Lysias took the public stage and defended the treaty as best he could. He did persuade them, and gaining their goodwill, he returned to Antioch. This is the outcome of the king's strategy and settlement.
Thank you. Okay, so again, more battles and things like that. But notice some of the language here. The King of Kings, creator of all, prayer and fasting. All these things could be written in the New Testament easily. So again, we can see the transition from Old Testament to New Testament happening right around Jesus' time, and the language the church uses is language that really existed beforehand, which is why people ask how old, how old is your religion? Typically, I'll say 2,000 years, roughly, as Christianity. But the reality is, Christianity is just a continuation of Judaism. So we're going back many more millennia. So, thousands of years old. So, any other observations on 13? Well, Colton, you want to read 14?
Sure. After 3 years' time, word reached Judas and his soldiers that Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, had killed Antiochus and Lysias, his guardian, then had sailed into the harbor of Tripolis, a powerful army and fleet, and taken possession of the country. Now there was a certain alchemist formerly a high priest, who had willfully defiled himself in the times of social and political disturbance. He realized there was no way for him to live in safety or to approach the holy altar ever again. So he went to King Demetrius sometime in the 151st year and presented him a crown of gold and a palm branch, as well as some of the customary olive branches from the temple. During that day, he remained peaceful, but he seized an opportunity in his own stupidity when he was invited by Demetrius to a session of the council and was questioned about the disposition and intentions of Jews. Thus he said to the council, "Those of the Jews who are called Hasidenes, whose leader is Judas Maccabeus, are maintaining war and stirring up rebellion, and will not allow the kingdom to attain stability. Whereof I have set aside my paternal glory, meaning my high priesthood, and now have come here, I came here first out of my honest concern for the well-being of the king, and second out of consideration for my own fellow citizens. For through the rashness of those just mentioned, our entire nation is suffering misfortune. Because you, O king, are acquainted with the details of these things, please take care of our country and our hard-pressed people with the gracious love for mankind that you have for everyone. For as long as Judas is alive, it will be impossible for the government to experience peace." After he said this, the rest of the king's friends, who bore malice against Judas, aroused even greater anger in Demetrius. Immediately he chose Nicanor, the commander of a squadron of elephants, appointing him governor of Judea. He sent him off with a charge to kill Judas, scatter his soldiers, and establish Acclamus as high priest of the great temple. The Gentiles who fled before Judas throughout Judea joined Nicanor, for they thought the setbacks and calamities of the Jews would bring prosperity to themselves. The Jews got word of Nicanor's coming, and they assaulted the Gentiles. So they sprinkled their heads with earth and prayed to him who establishes his people forever, and always helps his own inheritance. by making himself present at the command of Judas, their leader. They immediately moved the army from there and met the enemy in battle at a village called thru. Simon, the brother of Judas, had encountered Nicanor in battle, but was halted because of the unexpected silence of those adversaries. Nevertheless, when Nicanor heard of the bravery of Judas and his men and their courage in battle for their country, he pulled back from deciding the matter by bloodshed. So he sent forth Poseidonus, Theodotus, and Matthias, to offer and receive pledges of friendship. After an extensive investigation of the terms, the leader communicated the terms of the people, and it appeared they were of one mind, and they agreed to the treaty. So they set aside a day to meet privately. From each army, a chariot came forward, and seats of honor were set in place. Judas appointed battle-ready men at strategic places, lest the enemy attempt sudden trickery. But the consultation was held in a fitting way. Nicanor remained in Jerusalem and did nothing improper, but he dismissed the crowd of people that had gathered. He also kept Judas in his presence continually, for he was heartily attached to the man. He encouraged him to marry and have children. Thus Judas got married and settled down and lived a normal life. When Aclamus became aware of their goodwill for each other, he took the treaty that was made and went to King Demetrius. He told them Nicanor was disloyal to the government, since he had appointed Judas, the plotter against the kingdom, to be his successor. The king became enraged, provoked by the false accusations of that depraved man. He wrote to Nicanor that he was displeased with the treaty and ordered him to send Maccabees as a prisoner to Antioch at once. When this message reached Nicanor, he was upset and very grieved that he had to break the agreement when the man had not done anything wrong. But since he did not act in opposition to the king, he watched for a strategic opportunity to carry out the command. Maccabees noticed that Nicanor was becoming more harsh in his treatment to him and more rude when they met than was customary. Judas decided Nicanor's sour behavior was not at all propitious, so he gathered up a good number of his men and hid from him. When Nicanor realized he had been boldly outmaneuvered by the man, he went to the great and holy temple and found the priests offering the customary sacrifices. He commanded them to hand him over. They declared under oath they did not know the whereabouts of the man he sought. So Nicanor stretched out his right hand toward the temple and swore this oath. If you will not hand over Judas to me as a prisoner, I will raze the shrine of God to the ground, destroy the altar, and erect at this place a splendid temple to Dionysus. After he said this, he departed. Then the priests reached out their hands to heaven, calling upon the everlasting defender of our nation, saying, O Lord of all, while you have need of nothing, you are pleased to have a temple for your dwelling in our midst. Now then, O Holy One, O Lord of all holiness, preserve forever undefiled this house so recently purified. Razis was one of the elders of Jerusalem and was denounced before Nicanor as a man who loved his fellow citizens, a man held in high esteem and called a father of the Jews because of his goodwill. For in past times, when there was isolation from the Gentiles, he was brought to judgment for practicing the Jewish religion. But with all zeal, he risked his life, body, and soul for all his religion. Nicanor wished to make obvious his ill will for the Jews, so he sent more than 500 soldiers to arrest Razis, for he thought that by arresting him, he would produce calamity among the Jews. Thus, when the soldiers were about to capture the tower and were forcing open the door of the courtyard, they commanded that the doors be set on fire. When Razis was surrendered, he fell upon his own sword, for he preferred to die bravely rather than fall into the hands of a sinner and suffer outrages unworthy of his own noble birth. However, the tension of the confrontation, he did not fall with exactness on his sword. As the crowd rushed, as the crowd rushed to the doors,
Couldn't even do that right.
he took courage and jumped upon the wall, bravely throwing himself down into the throng. But as people quickly stepped back, there was an open space, and he landed in the midst of the empty area. He was still alive. In a blaze of anger, he stood up, and his blood gushed like a spring, and his injuries were severe. He darted through the crowd. He climbed up on a steep rock, and with his blood completely drained out of him, he tore out his intestines, took them in both hands, and threw them at the crowd as he called on the Lord of life and the Spirit to return to them again. Such was the manner of his death.
Wow.
Very interesting way to take your life. Yeah.
Like a Monty Python.
The sword didn't wear off dead yet. It will be.
I'm going to kill myself. I missed. Yes. Uh,
Well, that was rather brutal.
Very interesting. The Bible it talks about a lot of death, and sometimes it's just a event this person dies. But when it gives an explanation of how somebody dies, I mean, it really you're
It
not going
really
to see
was
that.
good.
Yeah, you're not going to see that. But yeah, the Monty Python could have read that and definitely would have had.
They may have used it. You never know.
So don't recommend doing that. But yeah, he did the stage dive and the crowd parted and hit the ground. Fun times. Okay. Chapter 15, I'll read chapter 15 here.
So from this, is this temple, is this supposed to be the temple that was destroyed
In
later
70
in 70?
AD, yes. There were two temples. One was destroyed. This was the second temple that was
So this is the temple that was destroyed after Christ.
Right. correct. When Nicanor learned that Judas and his men were in the province of Samaria, he decided to attack them in utter safety on their day of rest. But the Jews who were forced to accompany him said, "By no means should you so cruelly and barbarously bring destruction. Show respect for the Sabbath day, which he who sees all things has honored with holiness above other days." Then the thrice sinful man asked if there were a Lord in heaven who ordered the keeping of the Sabbath day. When they declared, "It is the living Lord himself, the ruler in heaven, who commanded the keeping of the seventh day," he responded, "I am a ruler on earth. I command you to take up your weapons and complete the king's business." Nevertheless, he was unsuccessful in carrying out his heinous plan. In his utter vanity and arrogance, Nicanor decided to put up a public monument of victory over Judas and his army. But Maccabeus never ceased to trust the Lord and fully hoped that he would help him. So he encouraged his men to have no fear of any attack from the Gentiles, but to bear in mind how help had come to them from heaven in times past. Now they should anticipate the victory the Almighty would give to them. He also exhorted them to out of the law and the prophets, calling to mind the battles they had won, making them more eager to fight. Then after he revived their courage, he gave his commands, at the same time emphasized the Gentiles' faithlessness, and their failure to keep their oaths. So he issued each of them armor, not so much as of the security of shields and spears as with the encouragement of courageous speech. Then he inspired them all by telling about a dream, a kind of vision worthy of believing. The vision he saw was this: Onias, who had been high priest, a true gentleman of modest and noble manner, one well spoken from childhood formed in all that pertains to virtue, was praying with hands outstretched for the whole nation of the Jews. Then in the same manner another man appeared, distinguished by his gray hair and glory, and having about him a certain astonishing and majestic preeminence. Onias then spoke, saying, "This is Jeremiah, the prophet of God, a man who loves his brothers and prays fervently for the people and the holy city." Stretching forth his right hand, Jeremiah gave a sword of gold to Judas, and as he presented it to him, he addressed him as follows: "Take this sacred sword, a gift from God, by which you will strike down your enemies." Encouraged by Judas's words, a man so good and able in stirring up virtue and courage in the souls of young men, they determined not to plan out a campaign. Instead, they would wage war bravely at once, deciding the matter with hand-to-hand combat with all manliness. Because the city, the sanctuary, and the temple were at risk, their main concern was not first for wives and children, or even for brothers and relatives. Their greatest fear was for the consecrated temple. As for those who remained in the city, they were distressed and worried about the conflict in the open country. Everyone was now living in suspense over the outcome of the war. The enemy was nearby, their army was prepared for battle, and their elephants were strategically positioned, and the cavalry was just deployed on the flanks. Maccabeus noted carefully the great masses before him, the variety of their armaments, and the savageness of the elephants. So he reached out his hands toward heaven and called on the Lord, the wonder worker, for he knew it is not by weapons alone, but by the Lord's decision that victory is won by those worthy of it. Thus he cried out to him in the following manner: O Lord, in the time of Hezekiah, the king of Judea, you sent your angel, and he killed as many as 185,000 in the camp of Sennacherib. So now, O ruler of the heavens, send us a noble angel to go before us, spreading fear and trembling. By the strength of your arm, may those who speak blasphemy as they come against your holy ones be struck down. With these words, he completed his prayer. Nicanor and his men marched ahead with trumpets and battle songs, but Judas and his men joined the enemy in battle with invocations and prayers. They fought with their hands and prayed to God in their hearts and struck down at least 35,000 men, so they were deeply gladdened by God's visitation. When the battle was ended and they were marching home with joy, they recognized Nicanor in full armor, lying dead. With tumultuous shouts, they blessed the Lord in the language of their fathers. Then Judas, who was in body and soul ever the chief defender of his fellow citizens, and who from youth maintained goodwill toward his countrymen, commanded them to sever Nicanor's head and arm and take them back to Jerusalem. When he arrived there, he called his countrymen together and stationed the priests before the altar. Then he sent for those in the citadel. Before them, he displayed the head of the defiled Nicanor and that slanderous man's hand, which he had boastfully stretched out against the holy house of the Almighty. He cut out the tongue of the godless Nicanor and announced he would feed it to the bird bit by bit and hang up the rewards of his folly opposite the sanctuary. Then everyone lifted their eyes to heaven and blessed the Lord who visited them, saying, Blessed is he who kept his own place undefiled. Judas then fastened Nicanor's head to the wall of the citadel, a visible symbol to all present of the Lord's help. So they all decreed by public vote never to allow this day to be unobserved, but to celebrate it on the 13th day of the 12th month, called Adar in the Syrian language, the day before Mordecai's day. This is the way things turned out for Nicanor. So from that time on, the city has been controlled by the Hebrews. Thus I will end my story here. If I have written well and made my point in the narrative, this is what I myself desired. But if it was done poorly and is just average, this is the best I could do. Whereas it is disagreeable to drink wine only or water only, whereas wine mingled with water is pleasing and delightful and brings greater joy. So also the written style of the account delights the ears of those who read it. This then shall be the end
Of the short story.
of the short story that we started with at the beginning.
It's a good thing it wasn't a long story.
Yes. Being oral, I can only imagine how long that must have taken several hours to go over the short story. Um, I do love at the end, wanted this to be a good story. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If it didn't,
Oh, well,
darn.
The best I could do.
I did my best. Good for you.
Exactly. So,
Do better.
um,
A lot of dead people.
a lot of people died in the battles, as I said, was over years and years and years. So we read it in a few days, but it took place over years. And then ultimately, the language again lends itself towards Christian language. Um, and in some of it, it even kind of identifies how we identify our prayers and formulate our prayers by going, so Lord, you did this, and now do this. And Judas again here says, okay, the Lord did this to our forefathers, so we're going to pray that he does the exact same thing for us as well here and now. We need these walls torn down. Well, let's remember what he did in Jericho. If he sent an angel to wipe out 135,000 men, maybe he'll send an angel now for us. So again, this is how we formulate our prayers in the Orthodox faith, identifying what God has done, who God is, what God has done in the past, that he may now do for us, and then we give him glory. So yeah, very interesting. Any other comments on Maccabees?
At the end here, they talk about stretching their arms out in prayer, and
Which
that,
is,
I guess it. So it was the year 150, but that has nothing to do with AD, right?
or BC, no, it's it was around 150 BC, BC, yeah, before Christ. But this was written probably within 100 years of Christ's coming. So, again, a lot of the familiarity here, even
So before or after?
before Christ. So, even the mention of Jeremiah at the end there, clearly in the vision, clearly intending to be the prophet Jeremiah. At Jamnia, when they changed the Septuagint to the Masoretic, they didn't touch Isaiah. They wanted to because it was so rife through the New Testament. They didn't change much of Daniel, a little bit. They didn't change much any of Ezekiel, but they did change Jeremiah. They took a lot of Jeremiah out of Jeremiah and things that pertain to that book. So again, because Maccabees refers to it, it's like, oh, maybe we need to go back and revisit Jeremiah and see what needs to come out.
So it's because at the end Jeremiah gave a sword.
Yeah. So, which is very King Arthur,
A little bit.
So
So was this so like during those times, if you look at it, I mean, again, this all just a lot of it is like Chaucer's tales and like the round tales of the round table and everything. I assume they had this book.
yeah,
They had this book to read during that time
yes.
because it's like I mean, I guess somebody should have made a movie about this, but they probably have because it's like so many crazy things happen.
Yeah, the time of Christ and the formation of the Christian church, this would have been very familiar to them. It would have been relatively recent history. I mean, they would have been removed from that almost as long as we've been removed from the the Civil War. And so, even though none of us obviously were part of the Civil War, where we live has battle sites and things like that. I mean, it's part of our history, and again, we may not necessarily have uh, firsthand knowledge of it, but we have knowledge of it from our history and being shared. Similar situation here. This was a revolutionary war. The Maccabees did it freed them and gave uh, Jerusalem its freedom. Obviously, by the time of Christ, the Romans had taken over, so that had passed. But it's why the Romans allowed the Jews not to have to sacrifice to the Roman gods and to the emperor and all those sorts of things because of what we read here in the book of Maccabees. That's why they were permitted to, not eat pork and things like that. It's why they're permitted to follow their own laws and kind of be this sect that had its own kind of ability to exist outside of Roman law, even though Roman law normally didn't allow for those sorts of things. So it would have been very familiar to them. And so, yes, Jesus speaking about a resurrection or rising from the dead, familiar to them. That would have been something they, even something like a Judas, again, notice at the end, Nicanor's conspiring against Judas, and it's Judas, of course, who conspires against Jesus. So all those things would have been within their mind. There would have been great familiarity. So I don't think we need to read through 3 Maccabees. You're welcome to do that on your own. But it is in there as well. So a bigger question is going to be, what are we doing moving forward next week? Is there any requests on a topic or a book to study? So,
haven't we done?
We've gone through most of the Old Testament.
Gone through quite a bit of the Old Testament. We've certainly hit on all of, I mean, we've gone through, most of the history, if not all the history. We went through, read a few of the prophets. You were more than welcome to read through the prophets yourselves, the ones that we didn't do. Again, the later history with the Maccabees there. We didn't do a lot of the wisdom literature. We did the Psalms, certainly, most and went through much of that, but we didn't do a whole lot of the wisdom literature. We could. Job is always an interesting one to read.
Oh, yeah, that would be a good one.
So we could talk about Job, maybe.
Always very entertaining.
Can I ask you about the reading today? The epistle reading today,
Hmm.
where the was written out. So even though we say it's an epistle, there are like a lot of different letters in each one of these, right?
Hmm.
So today it was like Paul was admonishing Timothy to, I guess, tighten the reins on the people. And I don't know exactly what peoples these were, but it seemed that the men must have been behaving inappropriately. So he told them all these are the things you have to stop doing. And then the women had to um, be silent.
Right.
And I know a lot of people take that as that's what it's supposed to be like. But I think it was just these people that whoever he was talking to, they were not, it's sort of like with the Corinthians, he would tell them, yeah, oh, it's so nice, you're so smart, but you're really not. But so why is that put? I mean, I understand where like every day for the last couple of weeks has been um a prophet. So it's like the minor prophets. So those are all prophesying for Christ
Right.
coming. So that makes sense. Um and um but it's I'm curious how these readings get set because it seems that um, there must be some purpose for how they're set within the church calendar. But why was this one today? And then the one reading about Christ is this. It's almost the same one that's happened all week.
Mhm.
The same for 3 days, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and some of those are based on the saints that are being celebrated. So, tomorrow's gospel is going to be the same gospels that we had for St. Catherine, you know, female great
Mhm.
martyr, St. Catherine on 25th, so just, St. Barbara. St. Nicholas is going to be similar because it'll be the Good Shepherd thing because he's, a bishop. So those are kind of based on, those readings are based on the saint of the day. Why this one was today, it just happened probably to fall in the daily cycle. And yes, it was set centuries ago, and there was a purpose behind it. I'm not sure what that purpose was and why this one would be today. But yeah, I mean, we do have to remember that the epistles were written at a certain time to a certain people. The universal letters of James and John and Peter and Jude, those are more general
Mhm.
things. But these are, this one is literally written to Timothy. And yes, he's identifying that Timothy in Ephesus has a faction of people that are causing issues. They're not behaving appropriately. And he's telling them to rein them in. And yeah, very specific things. The Corinthians were irascible. So, I mean, they were they were the problem child, and had serious things. But what he's referring to here, um, I mean, he's pretty harsh on these guys. By rejecting conscience, certain persons have made shipwreck of their faith. Among them, Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have delivered to Satan,
Yeah.
that they may learn not to blaspheme.
Yeah. So you go there for a while, and then if you get your head straight, maybe you can come back.
Yeah, that they may learn not to blaspheme. So clearly they were blaspheming something. And so, it's very clear that they're kind of cut off now. They're excommunicated. I desire then that in every place the men should pray, lifting holy hands without anger or quarreling. So clearly there's issues happening here in Ephesus that are causing anger and quarreling within the church, which is problematic. Also, that women should adorn themselves modestly and sensibly in seemly apparel, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly attire, but by good deeds, as befits women who profess religion. To be noted that in Ephesus, the pagan temple was to that of Aphrodite, and you know who Aphrodite is a goddess of, and the priestesses there were dressed immodestly. So very clearly, he's contrasting what's going on. You know, a lot of them came from paganism, and their influence that they brought over, they hadn't quite left that baggage when they came over to Christianity. And so he's addressing those very specific things there. And he says, let a woman learn in silence with all submissiveness, which is probably something that all of us should be doing. You don't learn by being uh, haughty and you know, thinking that you know everything. I permit no woman to teach or to have authority over men. She is to keep silent. For Adam was born first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. Yet woman will be saved through bearing children if she continues in faith and love and holiness and modesty. And people take that, to be, women should just be, home barefoot with an apron on and not doing anything. That's not really what Paul is talking about. He obviously even had women as part of his entourage and deaconesses and things like that in the church. So clearly, I think in this situation, we're looking at Ephesus where the female behavior in general in the city was more than just the average pagan approach to things, and he's trying to kind of curb that. And it's very possible that some of the women were again, the priestesses in the temple, some of the women were saying things in church in a sort of authoritative way that he's saying, okay, no, let's, in your situation, let's maybe not have the women be the teachers in the church. So it is written again to a very specific person. Not that Paul didn't understand that what he was doing was going to go be shared, but I think you can take that in that form. Um, you know, but you know, that's yeah.
Do you think,
I think the church decided to do that one after the New York Times.
well, I mean,
To combat the New York Times.
it's sort of is like the bishop to talk to the priest to say, you got a problem.
Correct.
And
Precisely.
this is how you have to fix it. And these are some examples for things you have to do. The other thing that struck me with that is that we spend a lot of time worrying about what other people who don't believe in Christ
Mm.
are doing. But if the Christ didn't care, like he went into where the Samaritans were, he didn't tear down their houses of worship. He only got angry in the temple.
Mhm.
And yet we always worry about, what's going to happen. And but he focused on the Jewish people, and then he focused on those who were wanting to believe, but then even said, even if you don't believe
Mhm.
and you do what I say, you've got a better chance of going to heaven than some who parade around saying how holy they are.
Yeah, he was very specific when he charged the apostles and disciples to go out and preach. What did he say? Go to no town of the Samaritans, or go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. His focus was very, very much on, we need to get our house in order. Let's not worry about your house. The only time he kind of, I mean, he's critical of the Samaritans. He calls the Samaritan woman a dog. He tells St. Philippi, the woman at the well, he says, well, you worship in the wrong, and you worship in the wrong place. And so, but he doesn't, he says, you worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, which is a very polite way of saying, you guys are worshiping wrong, but you're kind of ignorant anyway, so that's okay. Um, but yeah, our focus should not be on what other people are doing. Our focus should be on ourselves. Our focus should be internal and not external. It doesn't mean that we condone any of that, by being silent on it. It simply is, it's not our, not our circus, not our monkeys, right? I mean, if they're doing something wrong, that's on them. But the bigger problem is we don't have our house in order. And are we really going to the lost sheep of the house of the new Israel? Are we making things available and open to people who want to come to the church? So yeah, I mean, it's one thing to see that a Protestant is doing something wrong. Let them do what they're going to do. We don't have any control over that, right? So, we have control over what's in our church. So
Thank you.
yeah,
Some days I looked at it and said, why are we reading this today?
dreams are very interesting. It's also interesting because we've talked about this a lot, and I've even preached on it, mentioned it in sermons. All these online Orthodox priests online that are preaching, to the general masses. And a friend of mine, Father Lucas Christensen, who has been here a couple times for Lenten lectures and things, reminded all of us that as priests, we are responsible only for the flock that we have been entrusted to. We do this online, we're recording it, it's great. It's available for the entire world. Literally, the entire world can access it. It's intended to be for this parish because you are the flock that I've been entrusted with. If a person outside of the parish, even in the metropolis of Detroit, outside of the parish, hears something and says, "Oh, I don't know that we should be doing that." Well, that's not for you. It's for this parish. Even a bishop, Metropolitan Nicholas, is only responsible for his metropolis, his diocese. He doesn't tell people in California what to do and how to behave. And that's where I think a lot of this online orthodoxy stuff is running afoul, is that some of the people are addressing it as if your priest is not doing this right, or your bishop is not doing this right, or that bishop is doing this and he's doing something wrong, then you don't have to obey him, you don't have to listen to him, he's doing it wrong, he's whatever. There's nobody, they don't have that authority. They don't have that authority. In fact, canonically, that was very clear that they don't have that authority. I don't have the authority to direct anybody outside of the Memphis parish, and no other priest or bishop outside of Metropolitan Nicholas has the authority to say, you guys here in Memphis should be doing something. So it was a very good reminder, and I think again is where there's some of this controversy happening online and discussion happening online. It's like we do this for us, not for so even within the house, sometimes we don't stay in our own lane. So so with that, I'm going to stop the recording.